Welcome back to the House Judiciary Committee this Thursday afternoon, January 14th. And we're going to hear from the family members of Mr. Garvey, who was lost his life this past year in a very unfortunate situation. We have a bill, H 613, that is based really on their experience largely and others as well. Which we're not taking that bill up right now, but since the Garveys were in town and at the State House, I wanted to hear their story and hear what they've gone through, and I really appreciate your being here. And so we'll start with you, if you could identify yourself for the record and proceed. Thank you so much for being here.
And again, this one's for you, Scotty. Good afternoon. Thank you to the Vermont House Judiciary Committee for asking me here today. My name is Judy Garvey. I am the proud mother of 3 children and 4 grandchildren. I'm 84 years old, and I served my entire life as a nurse. And I am in deep grief. I'm here to tell you today about my son, Scott Joseph Garvey, who cannot no longer speak for himself, advocate for himself. Scott was born on August 21st, 1969 in Westfield, Massachusetts, and he died on July 7th, 2025 in our apartment in Putney, Vermont, after being shot multiple times by the Vermont State Police during a mental health crisis in which he reached out dozens of times for help. He was unarmed and alone, scared, and had recently undergone major surgery. He was both physically and mentally disabled and required a cane to walk. Scott was an inspired musician. He was an exceptional poet, and he was a voracious reader, a traveler, and a dreamer. He was impossibly kind, quick to laugh, and slow to judge. He loved people with deep loyalty and quiet fierceness, and he lived as though beauty and art and music and human connection were all that mattered. Scott left behind songs and prayers, scribbled notebooks and poems on napkins. He left his beloved drums from around the world and a notable generosity that was second to none. So he left behind hundreds of friends and family who loved him and will never stop loving him. My only wish is that he could have known in life what has become obvious in his death, that people all over the world moved and inspired by his tremendous compassion. Scott was a devoted son, a loyal brother, and a treasured uncle to his nieces and nephews. He lived with and cared for me for much of his life. He brought me to hundreds of music concerts and art shows, and I was a mother to many of his bandmates who gathered in our house for band practice, and to this day, most people call me Mama J. I miss those days so much and would do anything to have them back. Just because we were poor didn't mean we didn't enjoy life. Scott and I walked our dogs for miles together, and we spent days upon days in thrift stores where he loved finding small treasures that he thought would put a smile on his sister Kara's face or light up his nieces and nephews. Often he would just want to drive to some faraway place he read about just to see something interesting. I love listening to newly discovered jazz musicians with him. I love listening to him come to Jesus and pray out loud each day for his family and friends, the homeless and the hungry, and even the police and firefighters. I love watching him read the Bible from cover to cover. He, more than anyone I've known, seemed to understand the true spirit of Jesus. We used to dance together to music of the 1950s, and we'd get off my aging feet and jig with him. He'd wake me up in the morning and record me drinking my first cup of coffee of the day. Oh, that's coffee so good, I'd say. And then he'd text it to our large family and they'd all laugh at me. Scott lived, loved, and played music in Boston, San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, Austin, New Orleans, and Memphis. He played drums in many bands spanning all musical styles, also always seeking musical authenticity. He was a drummer of Rated X, Scotland Bar and the Slow Drag, Flea Circus, On Beanie's First Prize Beats, and many others. He also co-starred in the underground cult film I Was a Teenage Serial Killer, and he wrote dozens upon dozens of songs and poems exploring existential angst, unrelated, unrequited love, and ultimately his relationship with his own mental health. A friend noted that Scott was a musician's musician was a real thing. Scott was always surrounded by music and misfits, by family and friends, vital records and bad coffee and his American Spirit cigarettes. He burned bright. He always gave more than he had, preferring to spend most of his meager Social Security disability checks on socks and sleeping bags and gloves for the homeless. His last request when he left Memphis in June 2025, barely able to walk, suffering from debilitating anxiety, was for his sister to buy packages of clean socks to distribute at the local homeless shelter, which he promptly did. I also cared for Scott. Scott suffered from bipolar disorder and PTSD. He needed my assistance. Excuse me. He needed my assistance often in negotiating the complexities of our modern, highly impersonal world that generally has little time for those living with mental health challenges. He was someone who was never fully fit in this world, but never stopped trying to soften it anyway. Scott knew suffering, but his own and others, and he carried it with the strange grace of someone who saw the cracks in everything and still believed that there might be light. In 2024, Scott wrote and composed Still Water, expressing his resolve to never return to Lakeside Psychiatric Hospital, where he reported being physically and sexually abused after reaching out for mental help. I'd rather stay home than go to the lakeside. I prefer oceans and rivers instead. The still waters remind me of unfulfilled potential, unlike the running and vastness of my dreams.
My mom wanted to play the song for you because of its significance.
I need to tell you the circumstances of Scott's death were not inevitable. They were a failure of those who reached out for help to follow the policies meant to safeguard those suffering from mental health crisis. It was a failure of the Vermont State Police to follow their own directives that were developed over 10 years. It was a failure of the medical establishment to take the time to listen to patients who are suffering mental health pain. And it was a failure of our collective lack of will to protect our most vulnerable community members from neglect and outright abuse in an absolutely and completely failed national mental health system. That day, July 7th, Scott needed a medication adjustment instead of got bullets. Sitting in his own living room, surrounded by the police he always feared would one day kill him. We always thought he was paranoid, but it turns out that he was right all along. Scott and I were so excited to move back home. My daughter Carol is Scott's best friend. I like to call them bookends. Carol worked so hard to get us a good home in Putney, where she was only 2 miles away and could help Scott take care of me, where she could take walks with her brother and visit thrift stores together, and where we could spend holidays and Christmases together again. My doctors and counselors say I'm in grief. I wake up each morning and not wanting to go on, wondering why I still have to be alive. I don't sleep. The only way I could be here today is because I am on some meds. I feel like an empty shell of a human being. I am depressed and I am angry at the inexperienced state trooper who shot him, and even more angry at the commander who told him to go in with nothing but a loaded gun after 4 hours of sitting outside our home. I am without joy, and really, if I'm honest, I just want to die. Though Scott's family is wrecked by grief, we will not let Scott be reduced to the worst day of his life. Like all those suffering from mental health challenges, he was infinitely more than his diagnosis. Scott was a whole person whose life and spirit will be honored. As Scott himself would end, every one of the thousands of postcards and letters and thoughtful gifts he sent to friends and family all over the country. Be well, dream harder. I love you. I love you, son, to the moon and back, and then some. And I look forward to joining you in the heavens. So thank you all for this.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I'm very sorry for your loss.
I know.
I'm gonna just speak quickly. My name is Sean. Is that okay, sir?
Yeah, no, you don't have to be quick. Please just go ahead. I know that you wanted to testify as well.
And thank you for allowing us to play this song and become sort of a totem to him, our home family. Good afternoon. Thank you for your time today. I'm Sean Garvey. I'm Scott's older brother. I'm his big brother. I'm 60 years old and the father of 3 children. Currently live in California. I was in Montpelier for a long time and helped co-found the Green Mountain Film Festival. This is a rough and difficult message for me to deliver today. It may be too much for some of you to hear, but it is our lived experience. And I'm going to specifically discuss after the fact, after the moment that my brother was shot. I hope you're not offended, and if it's too much, tell me. I won't be offended if you have to leave. I do need to tell the truth of this experience. and sometimes it's grisly. Today marks 192 days since Scott's murder as a direct result of the actions of the Vermont State Police. The brutal word to use, murder, but Scott's death has been ruled a homicide by the Vermont State Coroner because of multiple gunshot wounds. I think we should call it what it was, even if it's uncomfortable. He didn't just die. He was the victim of homicide by the very people he was calling for help. On July 7th, during his mental health crisis, he was scared and frightened. He required the assistance of mental health professionals. I think of his courage, picking up the phone to reach out to someone repeatedly. He was scared that he's going to see police knocking at his door, scared that it would not go the right way, scared that what he wouldn't find is a nurse or a counselor. I think of the irony that he foresaw his own death in such a vivid manner, and that this story is so common, sadly, that my brother could guess the outcome with such ease. I can't get the images out of my head of my little brother I played baseball with for hundreds and thousands of hours, who used to stutter, who sat with me for hours upon hours writing down the songs we heard on the radio as we spun the radio dial back in the 70s. And we'd keep track of which ELO song was on the top 10 list that week. As he laid on the floor of his home, bleeding out for 47 minutes, was conscious. What was he thinking of as he lay there receiving care from the people that he feared most? Did he feel his life slipping slowly out of his body? Was he thinking of my mom or his drums or his dog Vinny? Of me? Was he angry with me that I had insisted he reach out for help, only to find himself dying at the hands of the supposed helpers? The trooper that shot him was one of a half dozen or so that had been gathered outside their home for more than 5 hours that day. While inside, Scott had effectively a nervous breakdown. For whatever reason, it was decided at that moment that they needed to enter his home, and someone decided to send in one of the youngest and least inexperienced amongst them. The initial investigation report shows that the trooper thought Scott had a rifle. While they scoured the apartment, there was no rifle or any firearm of any type to be found. To be honest, I imagine, I'll just be blunt, that they were disappointed. What's now being reported is that trooper thought that there was a pole found. I think it's important to know that the pole was his cane. He had fashioned a cane out of his drum set, the thing that holds up the cymbals, and everything with him was about drums. And that was the cane, which I believe is the pole, which in another irony ends up being the triggering event for his death. The idea that with that much time to think through what to do next, that troopers ultimately invaded the home of an unarmed, mentally and physically disabled 55-year-old man, guns drawn, is in our minds one tragic failure of many that day. There were no gas, no beanbag guns, no pepper spray, just a gun in the hands of an inexperienced state trooper who shouldn't have been allowed or instructed to break into Scott's home in the first place. Frankly, we believe this was a command failure and a systems failure. And while we hold the trooper responsible for pulling the trigger, we also hold the command at Vermont State Police accountable, who appear to have violated numerous state policies and directives in the handling of the situation, including turning away my mother and sister and not allowing them to assist Scott, taking control of the scene away from the mental health professionals and breaking into his home despite no immediate threat to other people or neighbors. I want you to know he was in an apartment. He was locked in, and with no weapon, he was sitting on his couch and essentially yelling. That was his crime. While there's an investigation ongoing, this is important for me to say clearly, while there is an investigation ongoing for which we await the results, we do not hold out any hope for justice from that process. Because unbelievably, in this day and age, the Vermont State Police have found every shooting by a state trooper over the past 50 years resulting in death to be justified. Every single one. They published this on their website, right on the second page. 47 shootings since 1977, and 100% of them are justified. So we don't take much comfort in the process of an investigation. I know it's jaw-dropping. What it says to us is there's no ability for self-improvement because apparently everything they do is right all of the time, every time. Every and any shooting has been justified. As many of you know, since that time, it's been one shocking and hurtful experience, traumatic experience after another, almost as if someone had designed a process to test us even more. And I'm happy to say we're still standing here, a little rattled, but the process of what has occurred since the shooting has been amazing. It would take down any of you, I'm telling you. As my wife and I raced across the country to be by my mother's side, we had to raise our daily credit limit after my mother was told by the state that his body would not be released for his unplanned funeral without a $2,000 payment. You heard that right. We had to pay to get my dead brother's cremated remains so he could attend his own funeral. A week later, my mother was told she would need to pay to clean up Scott's remains from the walls and floors of their apartment. Are you okay?
Yeah.
You will be amazed that the law does not require cleanup of a state murder by the Vermont State Police, but does require professional cleanup by the victim's family. Mom was told she would need to pay to repair numerous bullet holes left behind in the walls and ceilings by the Vermont State Police. She even had to pay for her own moving expenses because she clearly could never be able to return to her home. We've had to pay for our own grief counseling, therapy for our entire family, for all of our travel expenses associated with this, and even to come here to speak to you today. Finally, the realization that the victims' services offered by the state does anything but serve victims when the perpetrator is the state itself. Victim services from Vermont State Police are on the payroll of the Vermont State Police. And while they probably do a great job when the victim is somebody outside or external to the Vermont State Police, when it's internal, it's an inherent conflict of interest. What happened to us with the collection of information from my mother as she was running around my sister's yard screaming that her son had just died was that the victim services representative attempted to get her to schedule an interview with a detective right then and there. This violates every advocacy procedure known to man. When they cleared the apartment, there was no telling us what we were going to find. Frankly, as a novice in this space, I associated the word cleared with cleaned. And it's not. We returned, my son and I, to an apartment, back door busted in, open for 12 days to the neighbors. Blood spilled throughout the living room, medical waste everywhere, bodily fluids on the walls. His Red Sox hat was stuffed behind a couch, bloody. It's the one that I had bought him that opening day. a few years ago, and his broken dentures were on the floor. Behind him, behind the living room, there were bullet holes in the walls, 3 or 4 of them, one in the ceiling. And that was left behind for us. We weren't told that. We thought we were coming home to a home. All of my mom's earthly possessions had been dumped out of boxes onto the floor, out of the furnishings. There was clearly a mad search for weapons, probably to justify or better justify the actions that had taken place. You know, we all know, it would have been a much better story if a weapon had been found. It would have alleviated a lot of the sense of responsibility. We've made every effort to communicate this to Vermont's political leadership until we met Representative Boslin, who helped us and helped direct some of our efforts and our energies. I was leaving a very kind message for the governor every day by email and by phone, just asking to be able to describe what our situation was so that the state could fix it. I wasn't looking to yell at anybody. Clearly, we're reasonable people. But I have never had a return phone call or email message from the governor's office after 26 efforts. If this experience sounds harsh, it's because, in my opinion, it has been brutal and inhumane. It is a dark mark on the integrity of the Vermont State Police, and it should be an embarrassment to every citizen of the beautiful state of Vermont. If it weren't for the strength of our family and the help and support of our friends, we would not be standing here today, because the process would eat alive any other family with less love and resources than us. We developed a detailed list of recommendations. They were part of the testimony that we submitted today. It's on the website. I'm not going to go over them. Many of them are included in the legislation. I want you all to know, I'll finish. I live each day with the horrific guilt that I literally and figuratively drove my brother to his own murder. We spent 3 days together on our trek. We talked about his enthusiasm for spending the holidays with my sister, of the hope of finding a new band to play with, of his love for God, the importance of the Bible to him, and his desire to find a girlfriend. Our very last conversation, I pled with him, insisted he reach out for help. I wrote a letter. I said, you must, when we get there, reach out for help. He was no longer in danger. He wasn't in Memphis, and he was someplace safe. And he did just that. After 4 days later, he was dead. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Did Karen want to weigh in, or are you fine?
You know, it's submitted.
You don't have to, that's fine.
She submitted her comments.
Yeah, okay. No, I appreciate that. Again, sorry for your loss. We are later in the session going to look at that bill. I'm hoping that we have some understanding from the Attorney General's office on where they are with their investigation as well. But really wanted to give you an opportunity to tell your story, explain what your situation was, and I really appreciate that. And
no, we appreciate the time and attention from everybody. I know this isn't easy for anybody to hear. I would like y'all to know that back in November, we were asked by the Vermont Truth and Reconciliation Commission to present similar testimony. We went on for about 2 hours and 10 minutes there, but that was an exceptionally healing part of the process, as is this. So I apologize. Do I apologize? I don't apologize.
yeah,
Thank you for your time and helping us heal a situation that is insurmountable in how to process in your life.
Right, absolutely. And I do understand that you may want to testify later when we take up the actual.
We will be available for anything, anytime.
Okay to offer.
Yes, yeah, please.
Just want to say that I can only imagine how you don't want your loved one's story to become just the story of his death. So I just want to say that the story of his life that you shared really impacted me. And I'll think of him the way that you described him. I'll think of Scott as the drummer and musician and poet and full of life. The son, the friend, the brother. And I really honor your ability to be here. I don't know what to call it. I don't know if it's courage or sheer will.
I think it's love.
Love. So I honor your love for your loved one. And thank you for sharing his story.
Thank you, Paul, for listening. I appreciate you all. Thank you.
I also just want to say thank you. I know this is hard, and I know that you live with this every single minute. So the fact that you're willing to endure extra pain to let us learn from this horrendous experience, and you're in such great hands with Michelle.
Wonderful, just wonderful. I
So
appreciate her so much.
thank you. I just can picture Scott being so proud of all the work that he's doing.
Thank you. And I appreciate your Lieutenant Governor too. I found him a very nice person with a big heart.
Yeah, you give him a kiss.
His dinner yesterday.
Yeah, it's
He was
okay, you can
very
mention
supportive, and Judy asked if she could give him a kiss on the cheek.
Made my day.
Maybe his too.
I hope so.
Thank you.
Could I just say, I hope this was communicated. This isn't easy. This issue is one of the most complicated that we're dealing with as human beings right now. And it's not getting any better, it's getting much worse fairly quickly. And I appreciate that you have to grapple with conflicting demands on resources and time, but also that you have the gumption to take it on as individuals. This is not easy. We've had long conversations with Wilda about where we really need to move as a society. And it's definitely not necessarily law enforcement interacting with people who are having mental health crises. But it is what we have right now. It's the system we have, and we're trying to work within that system so that we can ensure this doesn't happen to other people in Vermont and even be a national role model outside the state. Again, I'm really grateful, and I do know that there are a lot of demands on your time, and I appreciate that you're willing to consider this.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll meet right after the floor tomorrow. We'll probably have a small poll on H545, and we will have some discussion on H5 and probably have a vote on H5. So